Korea's annual college entrance test, known as Suneung, kicked off earlier this morning. And as always, the country went out of its way to better accommodate test takers by grounding most flights to reduce noise pollution and by calling on businesses to open doors an hour later to ease traffic congestion. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Thursday, November 14th, which is also Suneung Day here in South Korea, during which over 500,000 test takers took their seats early this morning for the annual college entrance examination that paves their path to higher education. For more on this, I have Shin Hieun, a correspondent for AFP News Agency. Hieun, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I also have Yang Chien-Hao, a journalist from Taiwan based here in South Korea. Chien-Hao, welcome back.
Good evening, and thanks for having him here.
Right, Hieun, we'll start with you. For the sake of our viewers who may not be familiar with Suneung, do tell us a bit about this annual college entrance examination, including its importance and the subjects it covers, as well as how long it takes.
Sure. So basically, over 500,000 students take the Suneung. And it's a massive test. I mean, it takes 9 hours. It's a 5-part multiple choice question. And it's basically the test of a lifetime. Students take subjects like Korean, maths, history, and English. And then other subjects depend on choice, of course. But the thing is, this day basically comes down, their whole schooling is, their whole 12 schooling is, comes down to one single exam result. So it's a lot of pressure for the Korean students. And the reason why the test is so important is because of the South Korea's rigid labor structure. Students don't have very limited career opportunities, which means that they really need to go into prestigious universities. And this can actually boost social mobility, economic security, and even prospective marriage. So it's really important that they actually need to get a good result in all of this test. And the thing is, the intense academic pressure in South Korea is actually associated with high adolescent depression rates and suicide rates globally. And this is actually because of the very competitive education system. So it's such a vital day for these test takers. And this year's test is actually very special because over 1/3 of the test takers are retest students, which means they are taking the test at least 2 times. And the reason is mainly because of the government's medical reform plan. And that's because a lot of the students want to go to medical schools and they are trying to apply for it.
Right, and before we delve further into that aspect of today's Suneung Day, Chien-Hao, you've covered this critical college entrance examination, I believe.
Right.
What were your major takeaways from your coverage?
I once did an interview like in 2012. I found a boy from Common Province, and he came to Seoul. He has already graduated from the high school, so it was retook for him. And he stayed in Koshwon in Seoul, and that was the very first time for me to really see how Koshwon is, a very small, very tiny room. And I've already know that in Korea, many people who want to attend the public servants exam, they come to Seoul and living in Koshwon, especially in the Noryangjin area, and attending the cram school. In Korea, you call the academy every day. Later, I found that there are also many young students who are also living in Koshwon, trying to attending the Suneung, retook the Suneung. For me, it's like a very new cultural experience because you really feel that the actual dynamic competition. I've already have the same experience once in Taiwan, which was very similar, but I had a rather happier and with more flexible time preparing the entrance exam to the university. But in Korea here, you can sense that it's a bit radical or extreme, and people are really working hard on it, and they take this really serious. And I remember The one I interviewed, who was preparing for Suneung, he asked me some English questions, and I saw the questions. Oh my God, this is so difficult. And later, I hear from my other Western colleagues, they also told me that even for native speakers, they failed to do it. And the next year, I interviewed with another guy, which is the former exam taker's younger brother. And he was on the 3rd grade of the high school, and I asked, what is your daily schedule preparing Suneung? And he told me that he attend high school from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then have 1 hour for dinner. Then it will be self-study time from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then after 11 p.m., he attended the academy, the cram school, from 11 to 1 a.m. So he said that for him and most of his classmates, they only have like 3 or 4 hours to sleep. So for me, it's quite shocking. I don't think it's a proper way or for young generations to live and experience like that. It's too stressful.
Right, hence the psychological pressure that Hieun, you touched upon earlier. Hieun, the AFP touched upon some of the extraordinary efforts made by the country itself to better accommodate the test takers on this particular day. Do tell us a bit more about that coverage and also your thoughts regarding such measures.
Yeah, I mean, authorities take very aggressive measures to prevent any disturbance since, as I said, it's the test of a lifetime. And I think it's absolutely extraordinary to see this because it's never something you could see in the Europe or the Western world like in the US. For the country to halt entirely is basically unimaginable there. And so what happens is for example, to minimize noise around the 1,200 test centers, buses and trains are ordered to slow down around the test centers. The bus drivers and taxi drivers agreed to stop honking during the test hours. Constructions around the test centers are all banned as well. And also the very radical thing is actually to reduce noise disruption during the listening portion of the English test. The Ministry of Land imposed a nationwide ban on flights, aircraft takeoffs and landings as well, apart from emergencies. So which means that all these aircrafts have to just circle around the sky during that time, and they need to be at least 3,000 meters up in the air, and they cannot make a sound during that time. And actually, it's also extraordinary that 156 flights were also rescheduled because of this test. Public offices, I mean major businesses also, they changed their opening times, and that was due because they wanted to reduce the traffic congestion and help the students get into the tests in the time. And also the stock market, which is also interesting, it opened an hour later. This year, even labour unions were helping the students as well. So there was actually a bus labour union protest in Seoul, but they decided in order to support the students, they would have a silent protest, and they banned all chants and slogans.
Right. Chien-Hao, you mentioned this a bit earlier, but how does the relevance of Suneung here in Korea compare to the college entrance procedure in Taiwan?
It is a bit similar to Korea. Now in Taiwan, we have 2 exams, which means you will have 2 chances to go to the universities. The first one is called the General Scholastic Ability Test, so-called GSAT, which is held in the late January every year. After the result announced, you will be able to apply the majors in universities that you want, and then you go to have interviews in the universities, so that you will need to show how much interest you have, how much passion you have in certain field that you really want to do it. You really want to enter in this major in this university. So it's a little bit similar to the early admission, so-called Chongsi, right, in South Korea. And then if you are, unfortunately, you failed or you just gave up, then you need to attend the second exam, which is called the Advanced Subjects Test in the late July, which is way more difficult. After the scores being released, you fill the university application form, filling from number 1 to number 100. that which major, which school you want to go, and then it will be distributed by your scores. That is somehow a little bit similar to Suneung in South Korea. In Taiwan, during my years as high school students, the proportion of admission between the first exam, the GSAT, and the second exam, the advanced subjects test, it's about 30% and 70%. But now it has already become like half and half. And if you look at South Korea, the early admission, the Chongxi and the Suneung is around like 80% and 20%. And that means like most of the students now in South Korea, they've been admitted through the early admission. But you can see like in the foreign media, they pay more attention on Suneung. But indeed, the people attending Suneung is like decreasing year by year.
Right, because we have two admissions procedures, like you mentioned, the early admissions and the regular admissions, yes, where Suneung plays a very important role. And Hieun, as you mentioned earlier, this year's college entrance examination took place amid greater public interest in medical school enrollment. Now, this follows the government plans to raise admissions quotas starting from next year. Do tell us a bit about the public interest in med schools here in the country.
Yes, so the government's announcement on the medical reform definitely has generated a substantial surge of public interest and conversation over the medical admissions debate. And the thing is, the medical professionals in South Korea have long held a position of high respect in South Korean society. Becoming a doctor is not only a prestigious career, but it also is a symbol of honor, stability, and significant social standing. So which means, on top of that, doctors in South Korea are paid very nicely, and they often earn high salaries, and their job stability is also considered unmatched in this very competitive job market. So this makes medical schools one of the most coveted options for these students who really want to secure their places in this competitive and rigid labour market. This reform is getting 1,500 more seats, and for these students, it's basically a chance in a lifetime, since medical students were just for top applicants that could only be in a highly competitive field. And so it's very important that they really need to retake the test, and they have the opportunity to do it. When the government announced this plan, notorious hagwons or cram schools, they went absolutely wild, and there were lots of medical school prep classes, and parents were lining up, hundreds of students were trying to apply. And all of this craziness, amid all of this, you could see that these students aren't just what you think of the typical students, but actually students in their 30s and even in their 60s. And this was all because they wanted to go to medical school.
Right, that was actually quite impressive, seeing people in their 30s and 40s seeking to start a new academic path to become doctors. Mm-hmm. And yet, despite the public belief that doctors lead lives of much comfort and stability, junior doctors here in South Korea claim their lives are anything but that. Do tell us a bit more about this.
Yeah, I've covered the medical protest of the trainee and the resident doctors from 2020, like 4 years ago. And this year, it has become a very big issue. Many of them argue that the working condition is really bad. And indeed, the trainees and intern doctors, they are being relied and regarded as main manpower when doing surgeries, right? And we do have medical professors and the regular or qualified doctors. But when doing surgeries, the trainees, those intern doctors, they are like with the professors together, and they do attend and assist and learn from it, right? And if you look at the pay they got, those trainees and intern doctors, mostly I heard is around like 3 to 4 million won. It sounds good, but if you ask them, then how long do you work? Most of the people, the trainee doctors, they told me like 95 hours, 100 hours, 105 hours. That if it's like that, it will be really exhausted. And that has been the main issue in South Korea dealing with this problem, that indeed more and more medical students or doctors, they would choose to enter into the medical cosmetology instead of those like pediatrics or obstetrics or like gynecology on the base, or those kind of like basic surgeries. Doctors of these basic fields are indeed decreasing in South Korea year by year. I'm sure that in Arirang TV and or like you definitely have many coverages of the medical protest this year against the government's new policy of increasing or boosting the medical school admissions. But the students are claiming that it will not solve the problem and will even make the situation become worse, since there are no schemes, no plans of how to expand the, like, for example, professors and resources for those newly added students. Also, without details improving the trainees or the resident doctors' exhausting laboring condition. The medical groups, you can see that and the governments, they still can't reach any agreement till now. It has been like over 10 months, 9 or 10 months already. But the very interesting part is like since the government announced the additional admissions to the medical schools, the exam retakers, the 재수생, like Hieun also has mentioned, that this year has a number growth of 18,000 comparing to last year. So it's because like many people, many exam retakers, they think that due to the additional admission to the medical schools, since the numbers become like wider, the range become wider, it will be more easier for them to get into the medical businesses. From that, you can see that many people in South Korea, they still regard like becoming a doctor as their goal in their lives.
Right. Here, as Chien-Hao mentioned, there is a shortage in medical manpower here in the country, but also beyond borders, I understand. Do tell us a bit more about the shortage in medical practitioners over in the US.
Yeah, the doctor shortage issue is definitely a global pressing issue. Many countries are grappling with an aging population, a significant demand for more healthcare professionals, and also a post-pandemic strain on the healthcare system as well. And I think the pandemic really underscored the urgent need for more healthcare workers. I think the best example to explain this is Japan, since it has the same demographic issue as South Korea. Its most pressing challenge, and the demographic problem itself has placed tremendous pressure on Japan's healthcare system, and especially when it comes to rural regions as well. The areas have been particularly hard hit by shortage of staff. And it's not just Japan when it comes to the US as well. It has been projected that over 124,000 physicians, they will be of shortage by 2034. And also in the UK as well, the NHS, the National Health System, also suffers from shortage of staff as well. And I think the important thing is that all of these three countries, like South Korea, have also tried to increase the number of medical students, but they have been doing it for a very long time. So, for example, for Japan, they have tried to increase it for a whole decade, and they have been doing it very gradually, trying to get doctors into rural regions and giving out incentives, and also in the US as well. But I think the UK government's approach to it is very important to know, since the South Korean government's reform also referred to the UK's government when they were doing this, and that was that the UK government solution was to increase medical school seats by 25% every year, and that would be adding 1,500 more slots annually.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Chien-Hao, back to Suneung here in Korea. This year's oldest test taker was aged 83 years old. And last year's test taker, the oldest, was 82. She enrolled at a prestigious women's university here in the country this year. What do you believe are the broader implications of such endeavors by the elderly here in the country?
Remember, like several weeks ago, we talked about the glamorous granny, right? The grandma in her 80s are trying to enter into the Miss Universe contest. And now we can see there are also grandmas and grandpas they attending the Suneung. This is really interesting. I also feel happy to see that. Indeed, not to mention those older generations. I believe both in South Korea or even in Taiwan, those in their current 50s or 60s, they missed the chances of going to study in high school or even in universities because their family couldn't afford them to do so, or they have to earn their livings by themselves in their earlier times. So, and as you all know that the admission rate of entering into the universities from the 1960s to 80s, it is way lower than now, right? It will be very difficult, not going to be easy to enter into the universities like 40 years ago. So for those middle and older generations, it might become like regretful or pity because they were unable to choose their life. But now you can see like many of them, they have no problems earning their lives now, and maybe their kids are all grown up, and maybe they even retired. They will have much more time to achieve what they want to do. So, and also, as I've mentioned before, that Suneung in Korea, the questions of Suneung, every subject are very difficult, not to mention in English, right? All of the subjects, the questions are very difficult, even in the world. So instead of attending the academy or crime school, I do hope that the South Korea government can provide these middle or older generations more assistance practicing or preparing the Suneung exam and help them adapt the new university life once they are successfully admitted.
Right. Also of course, with the elderly, like
yes.
our grandmas in their 80s.
Sure.
Hieun, if you had a few words that you would like to share with this year's Suneung takers, what would you like to say to them today?
Well, as someone who's taken the test twice.
You took the Suneung?
Yes, I took the Suneung also twice, so I am a retest taker. And as a retest taker, I can tell you, after the test, it's a wave of emotions. It's absolutely horrendous, and especially for the retest takers as well, it's a wave of panic. And it just doesn't end there. They need to go home, they need to check their answers, calculate their scores, and then they're going to get the calls from teachers and friends asking what their scores are. So it's going to be a very stressful day. But I can say is, like, amidst all of the craziness, like, just take a deep breath, give yourselves a pat on the back, and they should be really proud of themselves for doing all of this.
Oh, Hieun, thank you so much for those words of encouragement to our Suneung takers this year. I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Hieun, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Chien-Hao, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of today's edition of Press Perspective. We return tomorrow to discuss a Korean cultural practice that will be included in UNESCO's heritage list. Do join us then.